All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is Felipe speaking at Second Earth Alternative. Now, I'm going to admit that this is not really the favorite topic in terms of making episodes. However, it happens that the last video that we made, we got a total of 113 views, which would be basically, after 300 videos, about half the view count of our lowest video ever. So the question is, why don't I just quit YouTube? Why don't I just stop this if I'm being hammered? Or, you can call it what you want, censored, shadow banned. You may even not believe that it's happening. It's kind of the reason why I'm presenting some of the information I'm about to present in this episode. But, the fact that this is happening, I can either just exit or I can keep going. And this episode is really about the reasons why I choose to keep fighting, regardless of the suppression or whatever is happening to this channel. If you believe that this channel has not been quote unquote censored, I want to show you a few comments out of the few comments that we're actually able to get because we didn't get a lot of views. One individual says here, "Hey, you have no views. Never even got the notification." A second viewer says, "Never even gotten the notification." So, if people are commenting on that, then obviously they're not being notified about the videos I'm making. In fact, I got more views from people who just went back and checked the channel, just naturally checking the channel, than I did from YouTube actually notifying. And I can show you what I mean right here. So we got the video right over here at 113 views. And if you go to analytics, and just really quickly, I'm going to push reach. Let's take a look at where the traffic source is coming from. So of all the 113 views, which is like I said, it's only half the amount of the lowest video we've ever gotten, 6.1% came from notifications. So what is that, 7 people out of 19,600 subscribers were actively notified that I had a video from YouTube? So I don't know what you want to call that, but it's certainly somebody at the headquarters doesn't seem to want to promote this channel. They don't seem to like me too much. At least that's my initial impression. And just to give you a sense of the amount of views and subs, what that equates to, that's 0.005, which means only 0.5% of the actual views accounts for the number of subscribers that I have. But what I found so amazing is that despite the repression of the last video that we had, there was a couple Joe Rogan episodes, one with Alex Jones, and another one with a much more reputable individual journalist by the name of Glenn Greenwald. And it seems that the things that we talked about in the episode were reiterated only a day or two later by both guests. And so we did have one other video in the past where we can kind of, by looking at analytics, kind of see that there was somebody who pushed the do not see button, so to speak. And we did say something in that episode that was kind of discussed by Glenn Greenwald. So here's what I'm talking about, here it is. Since the advent of the internet, there have been all kinds of independent creators that have had suddenly the ability to make informed videos that seems to challenge a mainstream narrative. The internet gave the individuals power. This is something that's supposed to be good for democracy. But as is happening right now, as I speak right now, there is a censorship that is unbelievably dangerous, and it's of the highest cosmic order, because we're talking about a highly deceptive planet that suddenly had the ability to make independent content by independent individuals, to share it at the speed of light through internet, and essentially have transparency with information amongst people. This was the pillars of what was supposed to save our democracy. Yet, somehow the very company, the number one company that's hosting these independent videos, are now being manipulated by advertisers or whatever groups like legacy media that are out there. They're being pushed to take away the ability for people to have transparency with their information in their work.
It is like, if you go back to the Snowden story, right? One of the reasons Snowden did what he did, one of the reasons he was so horrified by this, mass indiscriminate secret surveillance, is because the idea of the internet, the promise of it, if you go back and read what internet enthusiasts were saying in the mid-90s and into the beginning of the century, was this is going to be the most unprecedented tool of liberation and empowerment of people who don't have voices, because it's going to enable people to communicate and disseminate information without having to rely on corporate structures that can afford printing presses or satellites for networks. And that was true. And the problem became, if you allow the government to turn it into, this kind of tyrannical realm of surveillance, you gut what is promising about it. And in fact, you degrade it into this threatening weapon. That's exactly how I see censorship by Facebook and Twitter.
So the question is, why am I not quitting? Well, I have 3 reasons why there's no way, no matter, even if I'm only getting 1 view, why I cannot stop making videos. The number 1 reason is that it's never really been about the money. When I was like 13 years old, I kind of had a spiritual awakening. And it sounds kind of corny, but yeah, I was looking at the stars and kind of asked, how can I help? I really want to do what is best. And I really had good intentions. And I wasn't sure if I was talking to myself or whatever it was, but it seemed like there was a voice that was echoing back to me that was kind of saying, well, just be truthful. You have to be truthful no matter what. And previously I took martial arts. I got 1 belt under black belt for the martial arts of Aikido. And something that we kind of learned through martial arts is that you never cheat yourself. It's really important to not cheat yourself. It's actually true that I never in my entire academic career ever cheated on a test. I never looked at somebody's paper, never tried to get answers from somebody, never wrote notes in my hands. It's just my nature. I like to be truthful. So when I look in the world and I see things that are happening in corruption dealings, I feel kind of an urge to talk about what's happening, because as long as I see something that I find to be destructive for the general human family, for all of us, it's something that I will talk about. It's something that I've told myself since I was a kid that I would go ahead and do this. Now, the second reason is that I've always been independent, creator. For a lot of people, they saw the success of YouTube and they said, oh, I want to get on board with that. But I want to show you a specific page. This is one of the first video hosting sites where you can kind of publish your own videos, Meta Cafe. And as you can see, I do have an account there. I don't have a lot of videos, but look at the date here. July 2009, June 2009. So I was creating accounts in these type of independent sites long before YouTube was successful or had essentially taken over the markets. So it wasn't that YouTube inspired me to be an independent creator. I've always been an independent creator and just had to go on YouTube because they had essentially pushed out the rest of the competition and ended up being one of the few platforms left that you can actually have an influence in terms of talking to others. So, like I said, it's never been about the money. I have all kinds of other things I can do. I color correct films. I'm also a SAG actor. I work as a photo studio manager. I can do things on the side to keep myself alive, but I do want to continue being a creative individual, an independent creative individual. So that's reason number 2 why I just cannot quit no matter how few views I get. And reason number 3 is that this channel has actually had a pretty decent track record. Our second episode ever, which was more politically leaning, was regarding the corruption that happened in the DNC right after Hillary Clinton essentially took the victory out of Bernie Sanders' hands. And we talked about how there was election meddling, how CNN was this ultra biased, almost activist type of news organization that was pretending to be neutral. And it ended up that we were correct. I mean, Donna Brazile came out a year later. I think Elizabeth Warren also admitted in Democracy Now! That the DNC had essentially been corrupted. And we talked about this, that the DNC was being essentially funded by Hillary Clinton. And so our second episode ended up being dead on. But not just that, but we went from 12,000 views in our political episodes to only 200 with not a single dislike in between. I think for like 4 videos, we didn't have a dislike. And so then I decided to change the topics. I said, you know what, let's start talking about aliens and UFOs, because that's really interesting. And I really believe that this is something that should be discussed in the world. It so happens that our second episode was about Christopher Mellon. Now, if you don't know who Christopher Mellon is, well, at the time, nobody had even made a video about him. But he ended up being one of the 4 To The Stars Academy members, one of the individuals who had actually provided the tic-tac-toe UFO video that then the New York Times, all the major publications, all the major news networks, when they first started talking about UFOs potentially being real, they started talking about that. We were talking about Bob Lazar long before the documentary by Jeremy Corbell or before one of Joe Rogan's most viewed episode with Bob Lazar. We talked about how the Navy actually had a UFO patent. I think it was only a week or 2 before the Navy actually admitted that UFOs are real. So we've been having a pretty good track record with a lot of the subjects that we've been talking about, and to just quit because somebody's saying, no, we don't like your videos, or we want to keep your views so low that it's almost incomprehensible, it's not enough for me. You know, I'm not going to just delete the history of this channel because some big organization, which, like I said, I was an independent creator long before YouTube was even one of the most relevant platforms. I'm not going to stop just because somebody is not liking my channel. I mean, this is not the nature of Section 230, where the platforms are supposed to be neutral. But if you weren't sure about the track record, let's just go back to the last video, the one where we had 113 views, and I want to show you what happened only a day or 2 later with some of the guests. For example, we talked about the Biden emails. So let's take a look at what Greenwald said about the Biden emails.
But they do have emails and signed receipts from Hunter Biden.
Supposedly.
But they haven't denied that this is his laptop, which would be the first thing you would do.
This is the key point. So just the fact alone that Biden has never denied either that the conversations are real or that Hunter actually brought his laptop to that Delaware repair store. And, you know, we've submitted questions. I've submitted questions to the Biden campaign and to Hunter Biden asking that question specifically, and they won't answer because, of course, they're fucking real.
And now recently we have not just proof, because we had one of his previous aides actually confirm that some of these emails are real, but we have a nefarious connection, call it a plan, for Joe Biden to have worked with one of America's adversaries for the financial benefit of himself and those around him. Call it Biden Inc. I don't care.
But it was the journalists, the media outlets like CNN that took the lead first in saying that this was Russian disinformation.
Yeah.
You know, like the standard way to get rid of information that they don't want the public to believe. They just lied about that. They just made that up. There was never any evidence that Russia had the slightest thing to do with it.
And then when you think about Black Lives Matter and why there is such a thing as Black Lives Matter, why people are going out and burning buildings, it's because media organizations like CNN will straight up lie to them. They'll claim that the big issue is Donald Trump. And so something else that we talked about in the episode was, of course, the Chinese influence, how much influence China had in our system. It's something we've been talking about for quite a while. I was kind of surprised to see that Alex Jones went straight ahead, almost verbatim. I mean, very close to the talking points that we mentioned. He kind of said almost the same thing. So here, take a look.
It's only a couple $100,000. Like, I mean, as much as that sounds like a lot of money.
Yeah, but the bigger ones, like he's talking about
Communist
Google,
China,
Yeah.
Amazon.
Communist China's even bigger.
Okay.
It's bigger than big tech. It literally spends hundreds of billions of dollars buying us off. It owns Hollywood. It owns a lot of the big telecoms. It owns the majority of our debt. And I've got articles in the LA Times and New York Times I brought for you where they say Xi Jinping must destroy Trump to save America. He was our leader. And then at the Davos group, he said 3 years ago, I will destroy Trump. I will work with Hollywood. I've got all his quotes right here. And Xi Jinping said, I want to overthrow American democracy. I want to repudiate it. I want to discredit it. And Xi Jinping admits he admires Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin.
Do you understand what this means? There's a word for this. It's called a Trojan horse. China does not want to get into a physical altercation with us. They want to beat us strategically by positioning people in our governments, our media, our academia, basically major positions that would allow them to influence America in a way that is opposite of our values. So as you can see, it wasn't that our information was inaccurate. It was that somebody just wasn't liking what we're saying and decided to stop this channel for whatever reason. But, like I said, I'm not doing this for money. I've been doing this for long before YouTube was even one of the most successful companies in the world. So there's no reason for me to stop as an independent creator. I will be obviously hedging my bet on other platforms, but I'm not just going to stop until they actually actively take down my entire channel, if they so choose to. I'm going to keep going no matter what. And, at one time, I remember calling the new media the fifth estate. I know that journalists are, having difficulty nowadays. Their jobs are not getting paid as much. They're losing jobs left and right. And I think this has created a trend of journalists in a way kind of supporting the establishment so that they kind of keep their jobs. And I understand the incentives, the pressures that are helping, but I still want to mention that new media and journalists, they are the fifth estate. They are a necessary segment of our society that prevents our society from going corrupt, because if there's nobody who's able to challenge the big establishment powers, well, then the big establishment powers will continue to run over and essentially exert their weight and influence with no checks and balance, essentially. It's not like the politicians are checking them. So that's why I think it's so important for journalists and people of new media to continue to challenge what they see as a form of corruption. And, I just want to leave off with Glenn Greenwald kind of discussing the exact same sentiments. So to finish off, here is Glenn once again.
All human history, the entire history of human intellect, is nothing but humans believing that they found some absolute truth, and then a subsequent generation realizing that it's not just erroneous, but morally rotten. And if you preclude the ability of human beings to question and challenge every precept, every principle, including or especially the ones that have been declared most sacred, the ones that have been declared most unchallengeably true, you've deprived humanity of one of its most important weapons, probably its most important one, for fostering progress, for combating despotism, for questioning the pronouncements of institutions of authority. And that's what people who think they're anti-authoritarian are doing.
I'm so glad you're out there, because guys like you are one of the few that are willing to take this chance and speak like this.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. So those are the 3 reasons why I'm not going to be quitting YouTube. And of course, I would ask, if you like this episode, please share it to your friends. It's really, when you're getting 7 people notified out of 19,600 subscribers, it's the only way this video is going to get across to anybody. So thanks again for following me. This is Felipe speaking, signing out.